In this lecture we're going to be going over the very powerful if-else statements, where essentially we use comparisons to then execute some kind of function. So as always, I like to explain with an example or with something practical. So I've put two examples here. The first one is, let's say for example we want to see if someone's old enough to drive. And we can say if the person's age is more than 16, then they're allowed to drive. Else, they're not. So when we say else, we mean basically if not. So we can say if the age is more than 16, they're allowed to drive. If not, then they aren't allowed. So else is another way of saying if not, basically. So another example is if a password that's used isn't the same as the correct one, then we can allow access. If not, or else, don't allow access. So what I recommend you do is pause the video here and think of two similar examples that you can think of that would fit into this pattern. Okay, I hope that went well. Now I'm going to show you how you can actually apply this, and we're just going to use alert for now to try and get it to work. So as always, we can do this in a simpler way, but I always like to do it this way because it helps us to revise. We're going to create a button, and then we're going to use the onClick equals, and then a function. I'm going to call this function, let's see, if else, with the empty brackets, of course. And with the JavaScript, I'm going to create this function, if else. Okay, and we're just going to do alert just to make sure it's working. Okay, so let's give this a go. Click this tiny button. Let's just make sure. Also, we need to make sure that this is connected, which is not. src source equals, and then the name of our JavaScript file, ifelse.js. Okay, so that should be working now, and let's make the button actually have some text. Click. Okay, so I click this, it's working, fantastic. So now let's just have a go at using if-else. So let's have a go at doing this first example. So if the age is more than 16. So let's first put in the person's age. So we'll create a variable called person age, and let's give them an age of 20 to begin with. Now here comes the syntax. So we can say if, then in brackets we just put the condition. So for the condition here it is if the person's age, so person age, or variable, is more. So you might remember we used this before in the lecture for conditional operators. So this just means more than. So we're saying if the variable person age is more than the number 16, and then essentially what we do is we can, in some curly brackets, then put something to do. So we're going to move that and put that in here. So what we do is we put if, and then in brackets we put the condition required, and then afterwards within curly brackets we put what we want to happen, just like we do in a function. Okay, so if the person's age is over 16, we can alert you are allowed to drive. So let's run that. Okay, fantastic, because 20 is over 16. Now if I put in a number less than 16, that condition is not going to be met and nothing is going to happen. So nothing's happening. So what we want to do now is add another part that basically says, well, if not, then what happens? So we want to give a condition and something to do if that doesn't work. So then outside of these curly brackets, we just put else, and then we put some new curly brackets to say what to do if not, basically. So we'll do another alert to say you are too young. And then we'll save that. So now it's going to say you are too young because the age is not more than 16. So basically we have a variable here 12, and we're saying if that variable is more than 16, then do this. Now because it's not more than 16, the JavaScript goes straight to the else. So if not, then what do? Okay, I alert you are too young. Let's change that back to 20 just to make sure it's working. Great, it says you are allowed to drive. And obviously we could put that as any number and it would still work as long as it's over 16. You are allowed to drive. Fantastic. So let's just revise what we've done here. So we've created an if-else statement. The important parts to remember here are that you put if to start with, and then in brackets you put the condition required. So the condition here is that we need the person's age to be over 16. If that's true, then we say what to do within these curly brackets here, and we just say alert. Then outside the curly brackets we put else, so that's if not. So basically if the person's age is not more than 16, then we do this in the other curly brackets, which is to alert saying you are too young. So what I highly recommend you do is pause the video here and try and replicate exactly what I've done here. Maybe change the variable name and the condition slightly, so maybe you have to be over 18 or something like that, and change what alerts. Whatever you like, just make sure that you're practicing how to use this correctly and how to write it out correctly, because it does take a few times. So once you've done that, let's have a go at the second example here. So we're going to start again from scratch. We've just got the function here. So inside this function, so we're going to have password. So I'm going to create a variable called var correct password equals, let's put in a really good password like my password 1234. No one's ever going to remember that one. No one's ever going to be able to hack us. Now let's put in var attempted password. Now obviously on a website this would be coming in from the HTML. When someone writes in, I'll just show you really quickly. For example, if we have an input text and then right here or something like this. So obviously in real life we would have it where someone puts in their password here, my password or whatever. We'll be getting on to how we can do that in the future, but for now, to keep things simple and to keep us focusing on the JavaScript at hand, we can just imagine that and we can just put in these variables for now. So I'm going to put my attempted password as password. So as you can see, the passwords are different. Now I'm going to create an if-else statement. So I want to say basically if the correct password, if the attempted password is the same as the correct password, then I want to have an alert saying access granted. If not, then I want to say access denied or something like that. So I'm going to start off by writing if, not in caps, if, and then in brackets the condition. So the condition, in order for this to have a positive response, we need to have the correct password to be equal to the attempted password. And if you remember from the previous lecture, to say equal to, we just use two equal signs. And then we put in attempted password. So if the correct password is equal to the attempted password, and then we're going to use some curly brackets to say what we want to happen in this situation. So we just want an alert to say password correct, access granted. Great. Now, if not, so let's just give this a try first, So refresh this page. So we'll click. Obviously nothing's going to happen here because the correct password is not the same as the attempted password. Just to show you that it's working correctly, let's make them so they are actually the same. So I refresh. There you go, password correct, access granted. Now let's go back to having them different and we'll add an else. So if not, so we'll just write else, and then we just have to add some more curly brackets to say what to happen now. We just put alert incorrect password. So now we'll see when we run this, because the correct password is not the same as the attempted password, this will not be true. So it will just skip straight towards the else, and it will alert incorrect password, access denied. So we'll click through here, encrypt password, access denied. And just to show you one more time, if these two are the same, then it should say password correct, access granted. Fantastic. So obviously what we're doing here is kind of a simulation because we're not having an actual input for the correct password, and yeah, we're just alerting. We're not necessarily providing real access, but the concepts we're going over here are so very important. We're laying down the foundations here. You can think of it like that. We're getting the important conceptual stuff down, and then we can work on the practicalities in future lectures. But if you get down how to use if-else statements quite quickly, you can apply them in so many different ways. So just to go over what we've learned today, we've learned about if-else statements. So that's where we can provide some kind of condition. So for example, if this is equal to this, or this is less than this, or more than, or the same as this, these sort of things, which result in a true or false. So if this condition is true, then we have some kind of function happen here. And then we write else, and then we put in the next function. Now there is a bit of syntax to remember here. You have to put the if, and then you have to put the condition in brackets, and then you have to put what to do in some curly brackets, and then afterwards we have to have the else and then some curly brackets. And the best way to learn this is just by doing. So really, I think the best thing to do is as soon as you finish this video, think of at least 2 or 3 examples of where you could see if-else statements being useful, and then try and make it work yourself. Don't worry if you're not getting the syntax right straight away. You can always just come back to this lecture and take a look at the syntax and give it another try. What's important is that you're giving it a go at least 2 times after this video. So once you've done that, I'll see you in the next lecture.